On February 24, 2022, as the world watched from a distance, Russian forces launched what was then a long-anticipated invasion across the borders of Ukraine. The Kremlin expected Ukraine to fall in a little over 72 hours, but the Russian military soon faltered in the wake of poor logistics and fierce Ukrainian resistance. It didn't take long for the Russian advance to devolve into the most brutal and destructive conflict on European soil since World War II. Nearly 1 million casualties have been counted as of 2025. The eastern countryside, once lush with green forests and fields, has become a cratered landscape resembling the killing fields left by the First World War over a century ago. Urban warfare in several cities, such as Mariupol and Bakhmut, has been compared to the bloody street fighting that took place in Stalingrad 80 years ago. The conflict has also become a frightening showcase of what modern warfare really is. Everything is being recorded, the videos going viral across social media. There was once a time when the most anybody heard about a war was in the newspaper, vague descriptions of troop movements and losses. Now we can watch men fight to the death in hand-to-hand combat with knives and small arms. Soldiers can be watched taking shelter in trenches while small drones drop explosives on them from overhead. Other men can be witnessed firing wildly in the air and running back and forth trying to dodge incoming drones that will explode and tear them apart on impact. Some drones even appear to mercilessly taunt the men as they lay helplessly wounded on the ground, raising their hands in a hopeless surrender. The sound of small propellers whirring overhead has become an entirely new form of PTSD. All of this is a stark reminder that in spite of new technologies, war never really changes. With no end in sight, it's never about who is right, but about who is left. But there is something that this war has produced, similar to other wars. With all of the death and mayhem, it hasn't taken long for soldiers on both sides to begin sharing strange and unexplained stories. As told by the men who fought and continue to fight even today, this is the smoke pit, and taking place in the calm after the violence, these are the true stories of the supernatural things they have encountered in Ukraine. While large-scale combat between Ukraine and Russia wouldn't begin until the invasion of 2022, the war has really been going on since early 2014. Against the backdrop of the Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity, Vladimir Putin capitalized on the power vacuum within the nation's government, seizing the Crimean Peninsula under the guise of protecting the region's ethnic Russian population. Sitting on the coast of the Black Sea, Crimea was also a strategically vital naval hub, allowing whoever controlled it to project power over the region's waters. As the Russian forces secured the peninsula, pro-Russian separatist groups within eastern and southern Ukraine rose up against the new Western-leading government, soon coming to blows with the Ukrainian military. As Ukrainian troops now battled these separatists, Western private military contractors, or PMCs, worked in the shadows to counter the work of Russian operatives, who many thought to be legitimate Russian special forces unofficially deployed on Ukrainian soil. A while back, one of these contractors, a man we will refer to as Castro, reached out to me over email to share the story. While offering us a unique glimpse at the operations that were taking place in the conflict's earliest stages, Castro's account is certainly among the earliest of the war's paranormal experiences. He writes, I did 4.5 years as a security contractor working for one of the larger defense contracting firms in the US. Though our company at the time was recognized as dealing primarily with aerospace defense, which it still is, the lesser-known security forces that the company keeps tend to be the breadwinner. Though our security forces aren't a defensive force, we do conduct offensive missions when the need arises, and it arose in 2014 with the onset of the invasion of Crimea. I was young and had just gotten home from a stateside contract when I was notified I would be going to Ukraine. It appeared Russia was using military contractors and flagless, regular Russian army soldiers and special forces to conduct missions inside the peninsula. A certain military organization, not wanting to be officially involved, but who wanted to protect interests in mainland Ukraine, sent out contracts. It's common throughout the less developed nations to have contractors fighting contractors. This would be different, however, because although they were recognized as contractors, we knew that we would be facing actual soldiers, just not wearing a flag. 2 days later, 3 days after the invasion began, I was in Ukraine and shipped off to the border of Crimea, where we were given our assignments and sent in. Lately, I've been asked a lot about what the Ukrainian army was like back then, and, well, to be entirely honest, they were great. The ones that stayed, at least. But it was clear they were under-equipped, under-trained, and had no morale. They were hospitable and were more than happy to have us, though it was clear we'd be picking up the slack. They'd given their all, and now it was our turn. I won't go into the details of our assignments, though we frequently encountered resistance, the nature of which can be found in any book on war. What I'm here to tell you is the less-known side of war. When sides clash, gunfire, explosions, death, suffering, it creates a lot of energy. And regardless of who you are and what you believe in, anyone who's ever been there can tell you how thick the air gets after a gunfight, after bombs go off. The fog of war. And in the fog of war, things can happen that no one either wants to openly acknowledge or stuff that people just refuse to acknowledge. Neither of these two stories are directly my own, though they were told to me by people who I wholeheartedly trust. I would give them my life and theirs to me, so for them to lie, especially about what I'm about to tell you, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't match their character. The first story was told to me by my dear friend, who we'll call Maps. Maps was prior service, Marine Corps, although his rather scrawny frame didn't give off that he was a Marine. We'll call him Maps because he was great at reading maps and enjoyed it thoroughly, so that was his permanent task. One day, while working in command and control, Maps was studying the roads of the area when he overheard a radio transmission come in from one of our patrol platoons.
Jeez. Be nice if they had some of these damn things printed in English. Okay. When was this printed? 1985. You gotta be kidding me.
Man, this is Patrol 6-2. We are taking heavy contact along the northern road. Cover the wounded and keep pouring fire.
Whoa. That's not good.
Platoon 62 comprised of 2 squads of 12 men each and were tasked with evacuation and patrol duties. According to Maps, P-62 had called in at approximately 14:45 hours, 2:45 p.m., and notified command that they had encountered heavy incoming fire and that they'd be breaking contact and seeking an alternate route to their destination. At that point, they reported no casualties. At 14:52, they called in again and advised that one truck had been hit by an explosive and that the vehicle was now immobile. They said they'd be dismounting and moving to the other vehicles, reporting that all 5 occupants had been injured but were ambulatory. Our command and control at this time began to reach out to other platoons to see if they could assist P-62, but were not having much luck. Everyone was either too far or themselves occupied with enemy contacts. After a few minutes, multiple attempts were made to contact P-62, all of which failed. 2 hours then went by, and then the last call from them came in saying that they had all been wounded, some dead, and that they needed medevac. This was roughly at 17:09, according to Maps. Remember that, 17:09, just after 5 p.m. During that 2-hour period, command had finally found enough troops to send to their aid, and so 60 additional contractors alongside a few stragglers from remaining Ukrainian army units formed a QRF and were sent to assist. At approximately 1800, about an hour after P-62's last call for support, the QRF arrived only to find all 24 men dead, their bodies lying in various locations. Truly, it was a tragic loss of life and our most significant during our time there. But there were some things that didn't really add up. The locals stated that a firefight had in fact started at around 1445 when MAPS got their first radio call, and the gunfire stopped after only about an hour, with the attackers making an aggressive push on the two squads that they had ambushed. That would have been sometime before or just after 1600, 4 p.m. Around this same time, the locals claimed that this was when they had gone out and checked on the contractors after the attackers had left, again about an hour after the fighting began, and said that they found several men who were still alive, but their attempts to resuscitate or save them didn't work. The locals said that most of the men had been hit by gunfire and shrapnel multiple times, and because they were worried that the attacking forces would come back to scavenge the contractors for equipment and intel, they quickly left. The locals said that they stayed for only about 20 minutes, and they were adamant that they had checked all 24 contractors and that all of the men passed away before they left. So the question is, if this took place around 1600 and the locals confirmed all the men were dead, who made the last call an hour later saying that they needed a medevac? The last radio call we got from P-62 came in at 1709 and gave MAPS the impression that the firefight had lasted at least 2 hours, not 1. But by the locals' accounts, everyone was already dead by that time. It's possible someone lived and that the townsfolk didn't realize that he was still alive. It's also entirely possible that they lied about all the men being dead, but regardless, I do know this. Platoon 62, which isn't their real call sign, was lost on that date and at that time. All 24 were killed in an ambush because they had gone down a road we knew had been mapped out for ambushes. We know that most of their equipment was damaged in the firefight, including most of their comm gear, and that the official information release stated there were signs indicating someone had tried to save a few of them as they were bleeding out, possibly the locals. Regardless of what happened, or whoever made that last radio call for medevac, we lost 24 great guys that day, and I will miss those that I knew very much. This next story happened while I was on site. I just wasn't a part of the incident I'm about to tell you about. Task Force Blitz, or just Blitz as we called it, was a slow-down task force formed to do just that, to slow down any advancement made by the Russians. It was not uncommon to be given maps that were heavily outdated or incomplete, leading to confusion when we stumbled on roads or villages that were not marked on those maps. GPS was working, but due to the weather at the time, most of our GPS units were not functioning properly or reliably, hence why we relied on those maps, and our dear buddy, Maps, who himself became increasingly frustrated because of the map's shoddy quality. While en route to an assignment, the units in front of our column reported seeing a small cluster of approximately 40 houses and buildings about a half a mile east from the main road that we were traveling on. Of course, our maps didn't show this village, and since we couldn't confirm if previous teams had cleared it, we decided we should search the village again. So my squad of 10 and another 10 guys dismounted and approached the village, joined by 2 armed interpreters, guys from the Ukrainian army who spoke decent enough English to tag along. My squad approached from the southwest, the other from the northwest. Maintaining comms while approaching, we identified a gas station, about 25 total homes and apartment blocks, what looked to be a government-type building, and other various structures I couldn't possibly identify. So, little by little, we clear each building. Unfortunately, we did find deceased people along the way. Thorough searches on our end found nothing. The village was left almost untouched, Despite the dead, it didn't look like any engagements had occurred here. No craters from explosions, no bullet holes in the walls, nothing. It's almost as if everyone just packed up and left. But as we were wrapping up the search of this village, the other squad came out of an apartment block with 2 children and a dog. They were emaciated, clearly starved. So our medics began treatment on them while we established a defensive perimeter and waited for an evacuation platoon to come. The children were picked up, and we moved on. Later, I got to talk to the guys who found the children and the dog. And again, this is where the unexplainable begins.
No good. It's locked.
Breach?
Yeah. Dima, you got the Halligan bar?
Of course.
Right. Get us in there, bud.
Dude, I thought you said the door was locked.
Yeah, it was.
Hold on a sec, Team. You guys hear that, right? The voice?
Yeah. Dima, you catch what she was saying?
No, but it was definitely Ukrainian.
The men who found the kids were the members of another squad, who I'll call Delta, Tango, and Papa. Tango and Papa were on point in the building, while Delta covered the rear of the building. All 3 then came to an apartment door and confirmed that it was firmly locked, so they prepared to breach it with a halogen tool. Suddenly, as they put it, the door simply popped open before we could get the bar in the door jamb. From inside the apartment, all 3 of them then heard what they perceived to be an elongated whisper, which Delta stated was loud enough for him to determine it was something said, quote, distinctly in Ukrainian, though he couldn't confirm what exactly was said. They proceeded to hold their position outside the apartment door until additional contractors arrived. When they entered the apartment, they eventually found the 2 kids and the dog in the living room closet, covered by several items of thick clothing. A woman was found down the hallway in a bedroom. They said it looked like she had been dead at least for several days, if not at least a week, by that point. Her injuries were believed to be due to a brutal assault. Before I had heard this story, I had heard, and it was confirmed, that an evac platoon had visited this same village about 5 days prior, followed 2 days later by another task force. Neither one of them reported finding children or this woman when clearing the village, but it was determined later that members of the same evac platoon had committed crimes against women and children while they were searching the village. The time frame of when they were there seemingly lines up with her death. Going back to these guys' story, what stands out to me is the locked door, because all 3 of them confirmed amongst themselves that it was locked, and they were about to break it down before it simply popped open. I will say Tango and I worked together several times after our rotation in Ukraine, and he established himself as a great contractor with strong moral character. I know from my time with him that he wouldn't feed into a lie, so I truly believe this happened. As far as knowing why that door just popped open, your guess is as good as mine, but I believe that that woman, in whatever form she was in at that time, was hanging on, watching after her kids. Maybe she wanted to be there to greet them as they crossed over, I don't know. But maybe, knowing she couldn't save them, she at least did her best to protect them, whether by locking the door when she saw our guys coming down the hallway, or if the door was already locked or not, perhaps she realized that our guys could save her children, and she took the chance at opening the door. Regardless, the last I heard, only the dog passed away. So she can rest, knowing that we saved them.
I don't know what's worse. The grad rockets. Or this damn cold.
Well, coming from Florida and all, I'd say the cold. I may be a bit biased, though.
Yeah, at least the incoming arty gets your blood pumping. You see movement over there? By the orcs? They tried to sneak in around us?
It's just those damn dogs. I guess we're not the only ones out here that are starving. Huh?
Fast forward 8 years on from Castro's contractor experiences in 2014, when Russian forces launched their invasion in the winter of 2022, many foreigners from all corners of the globe quickly began moving to aid in Ukraine's defense. While the cultural and professional backgrounds of these international supporters greatly varied, they were all united by one thing: stopping the Russian aggression in its tracks. Although their numbers are reportedly only in the low thousands, the men and women of what is now called the Ukrainian International Legion are very much active on the war's front lines and have participated in several of the conflict's major engagements to date. While regularly confronting Russian forces on the battlefield, it would seem that Legion members have also had their own eerie brushes with the ever-growing paranormal phenomena generated by the gruesome nature of the war. This next story, first shared with the Tales from the Grid Square Project, was provided by an anonymous member of the International Legion. While he, like many other rational people, admits that the combat stress and fatigue he was experiencing may have been a factor in what he saw, he can't shake the thought that it's just too bizarre and can only be defined as paranormal. He writes, "I served in the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, and once, in the span of a 3-day mission, I experienced something I couldn't explain. Our position was a little house on the edge of a small village near the Kharkiv-Luhansk Oblast border. Simply put, it was absolutely miserable. The place was like something out of an apocalypse movie. I'm fairly certain that this was the last remaining intact house in this entire town. The rest of the place, which we had to patrol through on our way there, was a pile of rubble and dead bodies. Everything seemed like it was on fire pretty much all of the time, and since it was winter, the snow at times was knee-deep. Add to that the constant shelling, aircraft, and the risk of the enemy finding a way in behind us and fragging us all. It was a tough place to be. One night, I was on watch, looking out from my post to the east. Earlier that morning, I had confirmed the location of the bodies of 2 Russians that our second squad killed. They were part of a 4-man reconnaissance element that had been sent to probe this position a few days earlier, and one of our guys cut them to ribbons with a machine gun. I had only been able to see their bodies after the village dogs started on them, and that's when I noticed them. The one that was closest to me had been decapitated, and his insides were spilling out of him. The other had been cut almost completely in half, if not by machine gun fire, then from the dogs. As I was scanning my sector of fire with my NVGs, my night vision, I saw 2 shapeless black shadows rise up from the ground where these 2 corpses were, and sort of just drift further up the road past our position. I mean, I was freaked out, but they didn't seem menacing or dangerous by the way they moved. It was like they were just 2 shadow things going for a walk, like 2 people oblivious to the war around them.